Welcome to the Siemens Service Challenge. Presented to you is a game design based on customer relation and communication dynamics. Your task is to deliver a service on time, keeping in mind the given guidelines. The game challenge evaluates the quality of service provided to the customer. Timeliness is a crucial factor. The money spent on bringing in a new customer is 5 times the cost of one retained customer. The player selects from a number of levels. This simulation shows only the quote process level. The player chooses a character. In this case, it is a Product Competence Center, marketing support employee. The level of difficulty for the gameplay can also be selected by the player. The game introduces a customer persona suitable for the level and difficulty selected. The customer requests a quote for a specific spare part. There is a constant threat from pirates of stealing the job, if not done in time. The game now gives a tutorial of the various tools at the player's disposal. The game begins with a flash screen, showing the customer asking for a quote from the regional entity representative. The regional entity receives a mail about a request from the customer and forwards the same to the PCC player. The mail can be accessed via the mail tool. In the inbox, the PCC player can find the forwarded request from the RE. The PCC player can read the mail and choose to acknowledge it. When the PCC player has a pending request, it is shown as a document hovering above him. The computer prompts the PCC player to analyze the request. This is done by dragging and dropping the Inspect tool on the pending request icon. On analysis, the PCC player realizes that additional information is required from the customer, and he chooses to ask for further information via the regional entity. As time passes, a few days in the gameplay, the PCC player awaits a response from the regional entity. The PCC player gets a response after a few days, visible to him as a new message in his inbox. The information the PCC player asked for has been mailed to him by the regional entity. The PCC player attempts to create a quote process by dragging and dropping the Create tool over the pending request icon, but he gets an error message indicating that there is a complication and he should take help from expert engineers. He then forwards the request to the expert engineer. Notifying the actors associated with the request process is given plus points in the game. In this case, the PCC player skips the notification of a complication to the regional entity and hence gets a negative score. This results in an anxious customer with a yellow emoticon. The emoticons represent the customer satisfaction status. We see a busy icon over expert engineer as he is now working on the calculation. The expert engineer replies back to the PCC player with a time estimate. The gameplay goes on whilst the player is busy with other tasks. And he forgets to notify the regional entity of the time estimate received from the expert engineer. The customer is kept waiting for a longer period without any progress updates, and the PCC player gets another negative point and an unhappy customer. In the meanwhile, the customer contacts the pirate as he is tired of the delay from Siemens. The pirate is an independent service provider. The game logic introduces randomized situations to make the gameplay more fun and challenging. Here, the expert engineer realizes that there is a complication in making the quote. He mails back to the PCC player informing him of a fresh time estimate. The PCC player in turn notifies the delay and the expected timeline to the regional entity. and in turn, the regional entity informs the customer about a delay in processing the request. We can see that the emoticon over the customer is not red anymore. This shows that the customer feels better about the communication update and the PCC player scores a point. A flash screen shows the customer informing his client about the delay. Finally, the expert engineer sends the PCC player a prepared quote. The PCC player uses the Create tool to finalize the quote. He then sends the finalized quote to the regional entity to be communicated to the customer. If the PCC player performs tasks proactively, then he is applauded by his colleagues. In this case, the player completed the quote much before the deadline. On the other end, the customer is happy that he received the quote without delay. And the customer sends a positive feedback to Siemens. This positive appraisal from the customer gives a boost to the morale of the PCC player and concludes a successful request process. The PCC player can now check the project overview, which indicates his performance and the customer satisfaction graph over time. The PCC player receives a certificate of merit on successful completion of the level. He can choose to take a print of it and save it for later. As a flash screen, we see a disappointed pirate who hoped to steal the customer from Siemens, but due to the good gameplay, he was unable to do so. The PCC player has now cleared the quote process level. Now he is eligible to progress to the next level, that being the spare part process. He progresses to the consecutive level with each level he completed successfully. This is a possible gameplay scenario for the quote-making process. The game in principle will involve multiple characters for varying roles, multiple requests at the same time, more tips given to the player during the gameplay, choice of more avatars. Stay tuned for the Siemens Service Challenge 2.0.